Ever get the feeling someone's watching you, even when no one's around? The haunted cemetery stories you're about to hear today will mess with your sense of safety. Stick with me till the end. What you're about to find out might just shock you. Like in the story you're gonna hear next, where a group of friends decided to explore a graveyard at midnight and ended up witnessing a crime they'd never forget. But before we dive into the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you never miss a terrifying tale. I never believed in ghosts, you know? Not until that day. We always joked about horror stories, zombie movies, that kind of stuff. But when you're out there in the dark, with the cold wind slicing at your neck and a silence that seems to swallow every step you take, the joke gets old real fast. It was Rick's idea. Of course it was. He was always the wild one in the group. The guy who'd do anything to prove he was brave. "Let's go to the cemetery at night," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. We laughed, sure, but deep down, I think we all felt that chill down our spines. The cemetery was only a half-hour walk from our neighborhood, in this secluded spot surrounded by old trees that seemed to twist and turn like they were trying to grab anyone who passed by. We agreed to go out after midnight when everyone else would be asleep. My parents didn't suspect a thing. I told them I was sleeping over at Luke's place. They trusted me, so it was easy. We met up at the usual spot, all of us in hoodies, like that would protect us from something. Rick brought a flashlight. Luke had a pocket knife, which he didn't even know how to use, and me? Well, I just brought a bad feeling. The walk to the cemetery was scarier than I'd imagined. The street barely had any lighting, and every little sound, a twig snapping, an insect, made us jump. Luke even joked, "If one of us screams, I'm out of here and I'm not looking back." We laughed, but it was that nervous kind of laugh, you know? When we reached the cemetery gate, the air felt heavier. The place was old, with abandoned graves, crooked crosses, and statues of angels with faces worn away by time. Rick's flashlight trembled a little as he shone it on the names on the tombstones. "Man, imagine if we see something moving," he whispered. I just swallowed hard. We started walking between the rows of graves, trying to look brave, but every sound made us freeze. Then, we heard it. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was someone panting and the sound of dirt being moved. Shh, shh, like someone was digging. Rick pointed the flashlight toward the sound, and the light caught a figure crouched near a fresh grave. A man, hunched over, throwing dirt behind him with a shovel. We stood paralyzed. He hadn't noticed us yet, but we could see he was burying something big. That's when Luke stepped on a branch. Crack. The man stopped digging, and then, slowly, he turned his head toward us. The flashlight illuminated his face, dirty with soil, his eyes red, like he hadn't slept in days. And then he smiled. That's when we ran. No thinking, no talking, just running. We heard him behind us, laughing softly, like it was all some big joke. We jumped the cemetery wall, crashed through the bushes, tore our clothes, but we didn't stop. It was only when we reached the main street that we looked back. No one was there, but we knew what we'd seen. And worse, we knew what that man had been burying. When I got home, I woke my parents right away. My mom was furious that I'd been out, but when I told them what we'd seen, her blood ran cold. My dad called the police before I'd even finished the story. But that was just the beginning. Because the next day, when the police went to investigate, they found something in that hole we'd seen. And it wasn't just dirt. The police arrived before dawn. My parents wouldn't let me go, of course, but Rick and Luke went with their parents to point out the spot. I stayed home, my mind racing, imagining every possibility. Had we really seen a body? Or was it just our imaginations? The fear of the dark creating monsters where there were none. But when Rick called me later, his voice was so hoarse I barely recognized it. "Dude, they found it," he said. He didn't need to say anything else. That hole in the cemetery had a corpse in it. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Stabbed to death, young, gang-related. At least that's what the cops were telling the reporters. No one knew who the man we'd seen digging was. But one thing was certain. He wasn't a ghost. He was real. And he'd seen us too. We were taken to the police station to give our statements. The detective, a tall guy with a tired face, made us repeat the story 3 times. "You're lucky to be alive," he said, looking us in the eyes. That's when it hit us. We hadn't escaped because we were fast. The guy had let us go. But why? In the days that followed, the police put a car in front of our houses. They said it was for protection, but everyone knew. If the killer found out who'd ratted him out, we could be next in the hole. My parents were a mess. My mom cried in secret, and my dad stayed up late checking the doors and windows. The worst was when Luke said he'd seen a car parked in front of his house, no plates, engine running. No one got out, but he swore there was a figure inside, just watching. We started sticking together, avoiding dark places, and I couldn't even sleep right. I kept thinking I heard footsteps in the hallway. The police never found the guy. The case became another unsolved crime, and over time, the patrol cars stopped showing up in the neighborhood. But we know he's still out there. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still feel that same chill we felt in the cemetery. Like someone's watching me, and the worst part? I'm sure that one day he'll be back. Creepy, huh? What did you think of the story? What rating would you give it from 0 to 10? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Seeing someone bury a body in the middle of the night is something that changes the way you see the world. But not every scary encounter comes from a criminal. Like in the story you're about to see, where what appears might not even be among the living anymore. I grew up with a cemetery literally in my backyard. While other kids played tag or hide and seek, I'd look out my bedroom window and see those old crooked headstones, like rotten teeth jutting from the earth. My parents always told me not to go past the wall, that it was a place of respect, but you know how it is. The more they forbid you, the more curiosity gnaws at you. At 14, after a boring day at school, I decided I was going to explore that place alone. No friends, no telling anyone. I wanted to feel the chill of being there. Completely alone, with no one to call me a coward if I ran. The cemetery gate creaked as if complaining about my presence, but I went in anyway. The ground was uneven, full of holes and roots that seemed to want to trip me. The oldest headstones were so worn that I could barely read the names. Some had dates from the 19th century, and I'd imagine how many stories were buried there. How many secrets, how many fears, how many last breaths. That's when I saw her. An elderly lady dressed in black appeared out of nowhere beside me, as if she had always been there and I just hadn't noticed. My heart skipped a beat, but she didn't seem scary. She had a sad but calm air about her, like someone who had already cried all the tears she had to cry. "Do you like roses?" she asked in a whisper that almost got lost in the wind. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, a bit awkwardly. "My little sister loved roses," she continued, running her fingers over a small headstone, almost hidden among the others. "Rose. She died at 5. Cancer. She always gave roses to people, even when she was too weak to get out of bed." Her voice was so sweet, so full of longing, that for a second I forgot where we were. I forgot that this woman had appeared out of nowhere in a cemetery where I had never seen anyone but the gravediggers. "Is she here?" I asked without thinking. The lady smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. In a way, yes. After that, we fell silent. The wind rustled the trees, and I swear I heard a soft laugh, like that of a child. When I turned to look, the lady was no longer there, vanished, and I was left alone with that chill down my spine and a question burning in my mind. What the heck just happened? I ran home but couldn't bring myself to tell my parents anything. Who would believe me? I wasn't even sure if it had been real or just in my head. But the night had an even scarier surprise in store. I was in my room, trying to distract myself with a book, when I heard tap 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 on the window. My blood ran cold. My room was on the 2nd floor. There was no tree nearby, no balcony, no way someone or something could be tapping there. I froze. Tap tap tap. I took a deep breath and dragged myself to the window, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would leap out of my mouth. When I pulled back the curtain, I saw it, a perfect red rose resting on the windowsill, and there was no human way it could have gotten there. At that moment, I knew Rose had come to visit me, and she was still around, I couldn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the rose on the windowsill as if at any moment it would move, or worse, disappear. But it stayed there, intact, until the sun rose. When daylight finally filled the room, I felt a little braver. I carefully picked up the rose as if it would break. It was real as the fear still pulsing in my veins. My parents didn't notice anything strange. To them, it was just another normal day. But I couldn't get that lady out of my mind. Had she been a ghost? Or had I imagined it all? And that child's laugh in the cemetery. After school, instead of going straight home, I went back to the cemetery. This time, with the rose in my pocket. The place looked different in the afternoon light. Less scary, but still heavy with something I couldn't explain. A thick energy, as if the air was full of secrets. I walked to the small grave the lady had pointed out, and there it was. Rose Everett, 1889-1894, plucked so early but never forgotten. 5 years old, the same age I was when I moved into that house. I stood there, not knowing what to do. That's when I felt it, that sensation of being watched. It wasn't just paranoia. Someone or something was watching me. You came back. The voice made me jump. It was the same lady as before, but now she was sitting on a bench near the grave, as if she had been waiting for me. I brought this for Rose, I said, taking the rose out of my pocket. My voice came out shaky. The lady smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes that seemed to know things. She liked the gift she gave you. My stomach twisted. Was it her who left the rose on my windowsill? The lady didn't answer directly. Instead, she pointed at something behind me. Look. When I turned, I saw a small figure, a little girl, among the trees. She was wearing a white dress, a bit tattered by time, and holding a bouquet of roses. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew who she was. Rose. My heart almost stopped. She raised one of her hands and waved slowly, as if saying goodbye. And then, poof, she disappeared. She visits people who are kind to her, the lady explained, as if she were talking about the weather. But not everyone can see her. I swallowed hard. Why can't I? The lady looked deep into my eyes, and I swear her eyes darkened for a second. Because you also have one foot on the other side. That gave me chills. What did she mean? That I was going to die? That I was already half ghost? Before I could ask more, the lady stood up and started walking towards the trees. Wait, I shouted, but she was already disappearing like mist dissolving into the air. I was alone again with the rose in my hand and a question burning in my mind. What the heck did 1 foot on the other side mean? And worse, why deep down did I already know the answer? It took me days to process what happened. I went back to the cemetery several times, hoping to see the lady or little Rose again. But I only found silence and cold wind. Until one night, everything changed. I was lying in bed when I heard a different noise. Not knocks on the window, but laughter. Soft, childlike, coming from the backyard. My body reacted before my mind. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. Down below, in the middle of the lawn that separated our house from the cemetery, was she. Rose. This time clearer. Her white dress glowed under the moonlight, and the roses in her hands looked fresh, as if they had just been picked. She looked up directly at me and extended her hand, as if inviting me to come down. I didn't think twice. I tiptoed down the stairs, avoiding waking my parents, and went out the back door. The air was freezing, but I didn't feel cold, just an adrenaline that made me shiver. Rose was exactly where I had seen her, but now I noticed something strange. Her feet weren't touching the ground. She floated lightly, as if she were made of air. "You can see me," she said, and her voice was a distant echo as if coming from inside a tunnel. I nodded, unable to speak. "My sister said you're special," she continued, spinning in a slow dance. "That's why I gave you a rose." "Thank you," I managed to reply, swallowing the lump in my throat. "But why me?" Rose stopped spinning and looked at me with a serious expression, far beyond her 5 years. "Because you'll be here soon too. The ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. Was this what the lady meant by 1 foot on the other side? Am I going to die? My words came out in a whisper. Rose didn't answer. Instead, she pointed at something behind me. When I turned, I saw a tall, dark figure standing at the edge of the cemetery, a silhouette that wasn't human, with eyes that glowed red in the dark. It wasn't just Rose who was watching me. Before I could scream, Rose squeezed my hand. "Don't look at him. He only comes for those who are already marked." And then, like a breath, she disappeared. The figure in the darkness was gone too. I was left alone in the middle of the backyard, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The next day, I convinced my parents to move. I didn't give explanations, I just said I couldn't stand living near that cemetery anymore. They were puzzled but agreed. Years passed. I grew up, got married, had kids. But I never forgot Rose. To this day, every now and then, I visit her grave. And always I bring a red rose. Sometimes when the wind rustles the trees, I swear I hear a child's giggle, and I know she's still around, waiting. Because one day we all return to the earth, and the cemetery never forgets its own. Creepy. A rose left by a spirit is a subtle reminder that the other side may be closer than it seems. But in the next story, the presence of evil isn't subtle. It comes armed, hooded, and ready to attack. I've always found that cemetery beautiful in a scary sort of way. The old, slightly crooked tombstones looked like rotten teeth jutting out of the ground. The trees were tall and dark, and when the wind blew, the branches creaked as if complaining about something. It wasn't a place to be after sunset, but of course we went anyway. My friends, Josh and Carl, had this habit of challenging fear. Every weekend they'd come up with something. Who could stay inside the longest? Who could reach the abandoned mausoleum at the back? Who could touch the statue of that woman in the long dress who always seemed to smile in a weird way? I never liked her, but that's another story. That night they decided to play hide and seek. Yes, hide and seek in a cemetery at night. Brilliant, right? Josh said that during the game, he started to feel that chill on the back of his neck. Not the wind, not the night air. It was that feeling of being watched. He looked back and saw nothing, but he swore he heard slow footsteps, as if someone was walking slowly, deliberately, just to let him know he wasn't alone. That's when Carl screamed. Not a scream of surprise, but one of those raw, truly panicked screams. Josh ran towards him and saw among the tombstones a tall, hooded figure. The man was standing still, just watching, and in his hand, he had a hammer. Not a little nail hammer, no. It was one of those big hammers with a wooden handle and an iron head. The kind of thing you use to break bones, not boards. Josh froze. So did Carl. And then, the man took a step forward. They didn't wait to see what came next. They ran as if hell itself was behind them. Josh said he heard the man's footsteps quickening, the sound of the hammer dragging on the dirt ground. They jumped over the high cemetery fence, nearly breaking their legs in the fall, and didn't stop until they reached the main street, where the streetlight still made the night seem normal. The next day, Carl was pale. He swore the man wasn't human, that he moved strangely as if his bones were broken and put back together the wrong way. And worse, he was sure the man had smiled before starting the chase. I didn't believe it. Of course not. Until Josh decided to go back there alone, just to prove it was all in their heads. But that's the part I don't like to remember. Josh wasn't one to be afraid of anything. While Carl was almost having a breakdown just thinking about the hammerman, Josh just gave a crooked smile and said, "I'm going there tonight and I'll bring proof that this is all in our heads." I tried to convince him to let it go, but when Josh made up his mind, not even God could change it. He went alone, but not unprepared. He took a strong flashlight, his phone to film, and just in case, a rusty pocket knife his dad had left in a drawer. He said it was to cut through the heavy air, whatever that means. The cemetery was even creepier than before. The wind made the trees whisper things, and the full moon gave everything a bluish tint, as if the world had turned into a photo negative. Josh started walking among the tombstones, filming everything, speaking softly to his phone. "See? Nothing special. Just old dead pew, That's when he heard it. A creak. Not from a tree, not from an old door. It was metal. Metal being dragged on the ground. He turned off the flashlight and stood in the darkness, holding his breath. The footsteps came from afar, slowly, as if whoever was walking knew exactly where he was. Then the sound stopped. And then, tap, 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 someone hammering a tombstone. Josh couldn't take it. He turned the flashlight back on and pointed it at the noise. There he was, the hooded man, with his back turned, hammering a broken cross as if he were fixing something. But there was nothing to fix. He was destroying the tombstone, chipping away at the stone. Josh almost dropped his phone when the man suddenly stopped. And then he turned his head. Not his whole body, just his head. As if his neck had broken and turned on its own. The flashlight illuminated half of his face, pale skin, sunken eyes, and his mouth. His mouth was open in a wide smile, full of sharp teeth. Josh! The man knew his name. That was enough. Josh ran like a madman, stumbling over graves, hearing the man's footsteps quickening behind him. He didn't look back. He just ran to the fence, jumped over it, and didn't stop until he got home. The next day, he showed me the video. You could see the man. You could hear the hammer. But the worst? When Josh said, "I'm out of here," in the video, before running, there was a voice behind him whispering, "You should have left already." And that's when we knew it wasn't a caretaker. It wasn't human. And worse, it knew us. But how? After the video, we had no choice. Either we found out who that damned hooded man was, or he would keep haunting us. Carl was almost losing it, saying we should call the police, but Josh, even after nearly having a heart attack, still had fire in his eyes. If the police come, he'll disappear, and then we'll never know. We went back during the day when the cemetery seemed less scary. At least that's what we thought. The tombstones the hammerman had broken weren't random. They all had faded names, old dates, and a strange symbol scratched into the stone. It looked like an upside-down M with a circle around it. We didn't know what it was until Carl remembered a story his grandfather used to tell. That's the mark of a cursed grave. They say those who die with too much hatred come back, but not as ghosts, as something worse. We were digging around the ground near the abandoned mausoleum when we heard it. Bells. The church and the cemetery had been closed for years. There was no reason for the bells to ring. But there they were, ringing slowly, like a warning. That's when we saw him. The hooded man didn't come walking. He appeared out of nowhere, in the middle of the trees. This time, he didn't have a hammer. He had an axe. Josh screamed for us to run, but Carl froze. The hooded man raised the axe and smashed a tombstone with a single blow. The stone cracked in half, and we heard a moan coming from inside the ground. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't our imagination. It was something responding. We ran like crazy, jumping over graves, hearing his footsteps behind us. He wasn't running. He was dragging his feet, as if he didn't need to hurry to catch us. When we jumped over the fence, the police were already there. 2 officers in uniform looking at the cemetery, talking quietly. We told them everything, but they just exchanged a glance and said, "Go home, and don't come back here at night." The next day, the cemetery was cordoned off with yellow tape. The newspapers talked about vandalism, but we knew. Someone had found something inside. And the hammerman? Well, the broken tombstones were replaced. The symbol was gone, but every time I pass by the cemetery at night, I still hear the sound. Tap, 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 as if he's waiting for us to come back. And the worst? Sometimes I'm sure he knows my name too. Chilling, isn't it? When someone shows up in the middle of the night in a cemetery with an axe, fear stops being imaginary. But sometimes what seems harmless, like a man wandering among the graves, can hide something even more disturbing, like in the story you're about to see. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying our stories, so go ahead and like this video to let YouTube know you enjoy this type of content and don't want to miss any more horror stories. I was about 9 years old when something happened that I'll never forget. Back then, my best friend Carol and I were inseparable. We spent our days playing outside, climbing trees and making up wild stories. Our neighborhood was quiet, but it had a creepy detail. At the very end of the street, past the empty lot, there was an old cemetery, the kind with weathered tombstones and crooked crosses. We thought it was kind of cool because it gave the place an air of mystery. One day, in the middle of a game of hide-and-seek, Carol had the brilliant idea to explore the cemetery. "Come on, let's just take a quick look," she said with that mischievous smile of hers. I hesitated, of course. Cemeteries weren't places for kids. Everyone knew that. But curiosity got the better of me, and soon we were jumping over the low wall, entering that silent place. The air was heavy, as if time had stopped in there. The trees cast strange shadows on the ground, and the wind blew in a way that gave me chills. We walked among the graves, reading the names on the tombstones and imagining who those people had been. Then Carol suddenly stopped. "Look over there," she whispered, gripping my arm tightly. In the middle of the path, a little ways off, there was a man. He wasn't praying. He wasn't visiting a grave. He just stood there, staring at us. And the worst part? He didn't seem normal. His posture was strange, as if he was awkwardly put together, and his clothes were old and tattered. Carol squeezed my hand. "Let's get out of here," she said, and I didn't need to be told twice. We almost ran out of there, not looking back. When we reached the street, an elderly lady, Mrs. Martha, the neighbor who always sat on her porch, called out to us. "Girls, what were you doing in the cemetery?" she asked in her serious tone. We were embarrassed, but told her we were just playing. "Mrs. Martha shook her head gravely. "Be careful with the strange folks who hang around there. Not everything that looks human is human." That left us cold, but kids being kids, we soon forgot a bit of the scare and went to play in Carol's backyard. The sun was still high and the bad feeling faded, until suddenly I saw something that made my blood run cold. At the far end of the backyard, near the fence, the same man from the cemetery was standing there, staring at us. This time I could see his face better, pale, with sunken eyes and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Carol screamed, and the noise brought her dad running. "What's going on?" he asked, and we pointed at the man. Carol's dad advanced toward the fence, shouting, "What do you want here?" The man didn't answer. He just kept staring, that smile still on his face, until slowly he raised a hand and pointed directly at us. That's when Carol's dad lost his patience. "Get out of here now or I'm calling the police." The man finally moved, but he didn't leave. He just took a few steps back, disappearing behind the trees. We thought it was over, but the nightmare was just beginning. After Carol's dad chased that man away, we thought everything would be okay. But the atmosphere in her house became tense. Her mom locked all the doors and windows, and her dad kept watch on the porch, glancing at the street from time to time. Carol and I tried to play in the backyard again, but the fun was gone. All we could think about was that empty smile, those dark eyes. That's when we heard the neighbor's dog barking like it had gone mad. It was a tough mutt, the kind that wasn't afraid of anything. But the barks weren't angry, they were pure terror. Then there was a sharp noise, a yelp, and then silence. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear Carol whisper, "What was that?" We looked at each other and, without saying a word, climbed the fence to peek into the next yard. And that's when we saw him again. The man was crouched near the back fence, holding the neighbor's dog in his arms. But the dog wasn't moving. Its neck was twisted at an impossible angle. The man stroked the animal's fur as if petting it, but his eyes were fixed on us. Carol let out a muffled scream and the man slowly lifted his head. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, just a dark strand of drool dripping from his chin. Then he smiled again, and this time I swear his teeth looked sharper than before. Carol's dad heard the noise and came running. When he saw the scene, he pushed us inside the house and grabbed a stick. "Stay here," he ordered before going out shouting at the man. "Are you crazy, you bastard?" The man threw the dog to the ground and ran off, but not like a normal person. He moved strangely, as if his bones were broken and put back together the wrong way. In seconds, he disappeared into the thicket near the cemetery. The police arrived quickly and searched the entire neighborhood but found nothing. No footprints, no traces. Nothing. The neighbor buried the dog that same day, and the adults talked in hushed tones, with that look of not wanting to scare the kids, but being afraid themselves. Carol and I spent the night together, with the room fully lit. I swear that from time to time, I looked at the window and thought I saw a silhouette standing outside, watching, but when I blinked, there was nothing. The next day, Mrs. Martha came to talk to Carol's parents. She told them that in the 1950s, a man had been buried in that part of the cemetery without a name or tombstone. They said he did horrible things to animals before mysteriously disappearing. And the worst part? His body was never found. We moved away from there shortly after, but to this day when I pass by a cemetery, I feel that chill down my spine. And if I look too long, sometimes I think I see a figure in the distance, smiling at me. Carol swore she would never set foot in a cemetery again. And me? Well, I haven't either, because some stories don't have a happy ending, they just have a silence that never really fades away. How scary. What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Alexa and I were chilling on the couch, one of those lazy nights when all you want to do is watch a movie and forget about the world. We live in a quiet place, right? There's a Presbyterian church right in front of our house, and behind it, well, there's that old cemetery full of weathered tombstones. It never bothered me because, a cemetery is just a bunch of stones and bones. At least that's what I thought. The movie was at that suspenseful scene, and Alexa was already clinging to my arm when, out of nowhere, barking. That neighbor's dog, a pit bull that seemed to hate the universe, started going crazy outside. It wasn't a normal bark, no. It was that kind of frantic barking, like something or someone had invaded his yard. Alexa sighed. That dog again. I was already fed up. It was always the same thing. The owner would leave, the dog would go crazy, and no one would do anything. This time I decided to put an end to it. I'm going to talk to the guy, I said, getting up from the couch. Alexa looked at me with that, "Is it worth it?" face, but I was already out the door. The wind was icy when I went out, the kind that makes the back of your neck prickle. The neighbor's house was right next to ours, just a low wall separating the backyards. The dog was there, chained up, but when he saw me, he stopped immediately. He just stared at me, eyes wide, tail between his legs. Strange, because this dog was always aggressive with everyone. That's when I heard it. Beyond the dog's barking, which had now turned into low growls, there was another sound. Footsteps, light but clear, coming from the cemetery. My body froze. The cemetery was surrounded by a low wall. You could see the tombstones from our porch, but at that moment, it seemed much closer than it should have. And then I saw it. Between two old tombstones, a figure was hiding. I couldn't see it clearly because the streetlight barely reached there, but there was something or someone there. The dog started barking again, this time with a desperate tone, as if he was seeing the devil himself. And the figure, it moved. Slowly, as if it knew I was watching, it leaned forward. The dim light caught its face and my blood turned to ice. Blood. There was blood dripping from its chin, staining its tattered clothes. And in its hand, a dagger. Not a kitchen knife, not a pocket knife. A dagger like those in horror movies, with details that seemed to shine even in the dark. The dog went completely crazy, jumping against the chain. Its barks now almost screams. The figure didn't run away, didn't flee. It just kept staring at me as if I were next on the list. I didn't think twice. I turned and ran back to the house, almost tripping on the step. Alexa was already on her feet, cell phone in hand. "I called the police," she said, her voice trembling. I looked back through the window, but the figure was no longer there. Just the dog, now quiet, staring fixedly at the cemetery, as if it still saw something we couldn't. The police arrived quickly, but you know how these things go. They searched the cemetery, shone flashlights everywhere, and in the end, nothing. No trace, no blood on the ground, no madman with a dagger. The police officer even gave that skeptical little laugh. Sometimes the mind plays tricks, especially living near a cemetery. We locked everything up that night. Doors, windows, even the silverware drawer. I called the other neighbors to warn them, but no one had seen anything. The movie continued playing on the TV, but neither Alexa nor I were paying attention. Every shadow seemed to move. Every noise was a reason to look out the window. And the worst? That dog never barked again that night. It was completely silent, as if it knew that something or someone was still nearby. The police left, but the heavy atmosphere remained. Alexa was as white as paper, and I tried to convince myself that it had just been a misunderstanding. Maybe it was some homeless person, I said, more to myself than to her. But a homeless person with a dagger and blood on their face? It didn't add up. We decided to try to sleep, but it was as if the air had become colder inside the house. Even the normal noises, the wind hitting the window, the creaking of the floor, seemed threatening. Alexa turned to me and whispered, "Do you think he's still out there?" I didn't answer. The truth is, I knew he was. That's when the bedroom light flickered, just once, quickly. But we looked at each other at the same time. It was just the electricity. I lied. But then it happened again, and suddenly, poof. Everything went dark. Alexa grabbed my arm tightly and I could feel her pulse racing. "This isn't normal," she said, and I silently agreed. The worst part wasn't the darkness, it was the silence. No barking, no sound of cars passing by, just our ragged breathing. Until tap, tap, tap. Someone was gently tapping on the bedroom window. My body froze. Alexa buried her face in my shoulder, and I swear I felt my blood turn to ice in my veins. Tap, tap, tap. Again, more insistent. I slowly looked at the window, expecting to see a figure, a shadow. But there was nothing there. Just the emptiness of the backyard and, in the distance, the sinister outline of the cemetery. Then came the noise that almost made my heart jump out of my mouth. Scratch. Something was dragging claws, or nails, on the window glass, slowly, as if it didn't want to be heard. Alexa let out a low moan, and I, in an act of courage or pure desperation, grabbed my cell phone and turned on the flashlight. The light cut through the darkness, and for a second, I thought I was going to see a face pressed against the glass, lifeless eyes staring at us. But no, just the reflection of our own frightened image, and nothing else. The noise stopped. The power came back on suddenly as if nothing had happened. The TV turned on by itself on the same movie we were watching before, but now the screen only showed static. A high-pitched noise came from the speakers, like a distorted scream. I ran to turn off that thing, and that's when I heard it. A laugh, low, feminine, coming from the hallway. Alexa heard it too. Her eyes widened, and I grabbed the first thing I saw, a lamp, and prepared to face whatever it was. But when I opened the bedroom door, nothing. Just the empty hallway with the kitchen light still on. That's when the neighbor's dog started barking again. But this time, it wasn't the aggressive barking from before. It was a howl. Long, painful, almost human. And then, silence again. Alexa was trembling. "I can't take this anymore," she whimpered. Neither could I. I grabbed the car keys and said, "We're getting out of here, now." But when I opened the front door, a thick fog had covered the entire street. And in the middle of that fog, a silhouette stood right in the middle of the road. It didn't move. It just stood there as if it was waiting for us. Alexa grabbed my arm. "Close the door," she whispered. And I did. At that moment, I understood one thing. That thing, whatever it was, hadn't come from the cemetery. It had come for the cemetery, and now it knew that we had seen it. The door was locked, but I didn't feel safe. Alexa was in a panic, holding my arm with a grip that almost cut off my circulation. The fog outside seemed alive, rolling slowly through the backyard, pressing against the windows as if it was sniffing us out. And that figure in the middle of the street? Now it had moved. Not walking, no. It was as if it had slid a few meters forward, closer to our house. The fog enveloped it, but I could see its hunched posture, its arms too long, almost touching the ground. And the dagger, that damned dagger, glowed faintly. as if it had been dipped in something that wasn't just blood. The neighbor's dog started howling again, but the sound was suddenly cut off with a sharp yelp. Then, silence. Alexa swallowed hard. They killed Thor. I didn't know what to do. Police. They had laughed at us before. Run away? The thing was between us and the car. That's when Alexa remembered. There's a passage through the backyard, that hole in the fence. We ran to the kitchen, but before we reached the back door, something hit the window. Not a scratch this time, an impact. The glass cracked and I saw long, pale fingers gripping the frame, pushing. I didn't think. I grabbed Alexa's hand and we ran out into the backyard, jumping over the back wall that led to the cemetery. Yes, the cemetery. It was the only place that thing seemed to not want us to go. The grass was cold, and the ground between the tombstones seemed to move beneath our feet, as if something was trying to grab our ankles. Alexa tripped, but I pulled her forward. "Don't look back," I shouted, but I almost turned when I heard a whisper coming from all the tombstones at once. "You are already here." The fog had invaded the cemetery now, and within it, shapes moved. Not just the figure with the dagger, others. Silhouettes of people who weren't quite dead, but weren't alive either. Alexa started to cry. "It's the end," she moaned. That's when I saw the church. The side door of the chapel was ajar, and a faint light, candles maybe, glowed inside. I don't know where the idea came from, but I shouted, "There, we run to the church!" The thing with the dagger noticed. It turned its head in a way that bones shouldn't turn and screamed. A sound that wasn't human, that made my corneas hurt. The other figures started to move faster, but we were already at the church steps. I pushed the door with all my might and Alexa fell inside with me. Immediately, the sounds from outside ceased. The air was warm, smelled of incense, and the altar candles flickered as if they had just been lit. Outside, the fog beat against the church walls, but it didn't enter. The figure with the dagger stood on the other side of the door, its bloodied face pressed against the stained glass distorted by the colored glass. And then, it smiled. Not a smile of defeat. A smile of someone who knows that sooner or later we would have to leave there. The police arrived half an hour later, this time called by the other neighbors who had heard the howls and screams. When we left the church, there was no fog, no figures, just the cemetery, silent as always. But one thing they found: Thor's body, the neighbor's dog. It was empty, as if something had sucked everything out of it from the inside. We moved a week later. Sometimes I still dream about that smile behind the stained glass, and I swear that, on the night before we left the house for the last time, I heard a tap, tap, tap on the window of the empty bedroom. The figure was never found, but I know it's still there, waiting, and I pray that no one else looks at the cemetery after nightfall. So, did you like this story? If you made it this far, comment "I'm with you till the end." Because seriously, after this, we're almost scare partners, right? If the video left you with that chill down your spine, leave a like to let us know it was worth it. And if you like these stories, or staying up at night thinking about them, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming your way. To not miss anything, I'll leave another video right here for you to continue with me. Because if there's one thing we don't lack, it's mysteries to tell.